Is she working? And she didn't show up. He didn't show up from a bullpen. I think
That's
that's something now.
last week on Casey's show, which is Katrina Collier. Katrina, KK, and I were both at Billy Bob's Texas, and we thought it was really cool to go live from the bullpen. So we realized we thought we were so cool.
Yeah. No one quickly realized the internet was awful. Like, not even bad, awful. It kind of smelled like bullshit, and I don't even mean that as like a figurative thing. Like, it literally smelled like bullshit.
Yeah.
And
I mistakenly said that I was gonna ride Matt out of the pen any second, which has gone on to, you know, you would think I would be smarter since so much of my stuff is online that I would not choose those kind of words, but.
Well, I think if you're in any place where your feet stick to the floor, the Wi-Fi is going to be awful. And Billy Bob's definitely meets that standard.
Except for my kitchen, because I have teenagers, and every once in a while, you know, you spill the juice, you think you wiped it up. But, you know, I am so excited. First of all, I love Zach because he was the first one who told me that I was pushing prostitution on Twitter. I've talked about all the time. He helped me with my own personal branding. And the other thing is, I mean, he's so good at it. Even just the stuff that he's put together for our little Blab. I'm like, Katrina, we need to hire him to be our Blab editor.
Right.
And it's so telling. My first tweet today that I read said, if you work for a mortuary, you probably shouldn't be making jokes online. # know your brand.
That's a fantastic point. Not everyone needs an employer brand necessarily, right?
This is true. This is true.
So can we back up just 1 second, Zach? Can you tell us a little bit about you, the work you're doing for everybody else?
Yes.
Before we dive right into the bullshit of branding.
So I'm in kind of a unique position. I'm the director of marketing and sourcing at a firm called DBI, David Brown International. And we actually specialize in consulting and executive level recruiting for the architecture and interior design industry. And, you know, when I show up at SourceCon and they're, you know, they ask, what do you recruit? I'm like, well, it's not tech. And they go, well, what do you recruit? I'm like, architects. And I get a lot of, you know, confused looks and scratching, you know, heads and things like that. So it's a very unique industry. We've got companies that range from, you know, global beasts like Gensler and AECOM all the way down to, you know, small neighborhood hometown architecture firms of 10 people. So we really experience the range of different types of needs when it comes to employer brand and recruiting, and especially with the small and mid-range firms, we run into that a lot more. So we do a ton of recruiting, and over the last year, we've started doing a lot more consulting on the employer brand side, and it kind of evolved from one of our clients reaching out to us and saying, we love the work you guys do. Can you teach us how to make this happen here? Because we know something's broken. And I think a lot of industries experience it in different ways. Architecture is experiencing kind of this awakening as the baby boomer owned firms are, you know, starting to change hands. You've got the new guard coming in. A lot of people are starting to realize that the industry is run by old white guys. I mean, flat out.
Lesbian and black lady.
Right. And so they need help when it comes to actually talking to everyone, and realizing that, you know, hey, we don't necessarily appeal to everyone right now simply because of our past and who we have been in the past. How do we evolve? How do we grow? How do we change? So we have to have a lot of frank conversations about that with them and what change looks like. And I think the most important thing is we have to help them realize there's no magic bullet.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just hire a recruiter in-house and all of a sudden your recruiting woes are gone. Well, everything's good because you hired a recruiter.
And I imagine that in architecture, there's also a very distinct voice and style as you recruit. And so your employer brand has to convey that, or you're just going to get a lot of junk.
Oh, that's absolutely true. You definitely hit the nail on the head with that. There's more than so many other industries, aesthetics matter. And when I say aesthetics, I mean how you design, who your influences are when you design, what choices you make in design. There are going to be some firms out there that pride themselves on being, very modernist, high design architecture. And there are other firms that are saying, you know what, we're eco-friendly and we're meat and potatoes. We build the 5/2, 5/3 multifamily housing apartments that you see popping up everywhere that have, vendors on the first floor and then apartments above. So that's not as sexy as the high modern design, but it's very important. So I think there are different messages there to be had for sure. So that's kind of the world I'm coming from. I think it's a little bit different than everybody's day-to-day in recruiting just because of the nature of our client. But I think a lot of it translates universally.
I think so too. And like you were saying, you look at these architects or designers and if they have this slick new modern thing that they're trying to build, you would want to see that when you go to their website. You don't want a crappy logo and brand,
right.
And say you don't know anything,
Yeah, well, and I think presentation matters. I mean, when you look at resumes, all of us have looked at countless resumes, and I think for the basics of a resume always matter to us. Is it cleanly formatted? Is everything is it done well? Architecture and design takes that to a new level because they go, great, that's your resume. Let me see how you put your portfolio together. How do you tell your design story in your portfolio? And that's an issue that a lot of people don't ever have to worry about when they're applying for a job. So it definitely takes on a different conversation because you can have somebody that has all the hard technical skills, but if they if they don't present themselves well in their portfolio or really help translate that message.
Totally. And Jose actually brought up, he said, it's great that they realize that. How do you kind of go through that when you're working with the old boys club and you're like, there's a new world, right? I'm sure they're not responsive to like you singing Aladdin and showing them the whole new world. So how do you actually convince them that they need to get on board?
It certainly depends on what city the office is in as to how that reaction is going to play, But yeah, we've had discussions in the past of how do you tell a client that they need help when they don't realize it. Thankfully, a lot of our clients know it out of the gate. When they sit down with us, they go, okay, we're just going to tell you up front, we don't understand how you do what you do, and can you share that with us? We're just going to be open and listen. And there's always pressure points too when you bring up social media. There's always the one guy in the room who's like, I don't want to hear the word Twitter ever again.
South, so that Southern accent comes out immediately.
Well, and I think so much of the discussion when we're having to broach the topic with them is about helping them recognize who their competition is. Don't necessarily turn it back on them and say, guys, it's weak sauce. We need to fix you so much. It's not about fixing you. It's about saying, okay, well, here's where we are. Let's get some situational awareness. Let's look at the firms who you always see in the bidding process that are getting young talent or getting, that studio leader who's got, 15, 20 years experience that everybody's drooling over. Why did they go over there as opposed to over here when they would be better in a role here? And that's when we start digging into what other firms' websites look like, what their events look like, how are they tied to the community, how are they nurturing long-term relationships with candidates, especially coming out of, their undergrad or their graduate school work for architecture and design. They may not be ready when they graduate with a bachelor's degree, but if you meet them at an event and you kind of nurture that belief that we see you, we know you're out there, we're watching what you do, and the door's still open, I think that helps them a lot. So opening their eyes to what's around them and what they're competing against is the biggest key to finding out whether or not they're going to be receptive. And to be honest, some simply aren't. They'll see what other people do and they go, well, that's just not us. Okay, I understand that. And you can only do so much at that point. You can recruit till the cows come home, but if it's a toxic environment, or they don't tell their story well, or they don't pay competitively, or, they're top heavy and you're never going to get promoted. All these other things, there's no getting around that.
And I think
it is what it is.
Too, that employer brand, I'm sure the people on this chat are very well educated on this, but hopefully, for anyone who's thinking of employer brand as kind of a one-sided face, right? I think for a long time, even I thought of as employer brand as what you see when you get there. And you brought up, there's so many more pieces. Like there's this full scope. So how do you, I guess, what are your priorities when it comes to educating people on the employer branding elements that matter? So what are your top 3?
That's a really good question. I think the big one for me, and this is a buzzword you're going to hear so much this year, EVP. Employee value proposition. Basically what that means, for those of you who aren't familiar with an EVP, you need to get the key leadership people on the same sheet of music. You have to have conversations with the people that actually currently work there, the people that used to work there. You have to really wrap your arms around what the reality of the perception of the company's brand is out of the gate. It has to be a very honest set of conversations, and they have to understand what work there is to be done. So I think the first key is to really understand how well they know themselves and how willing they are to kind of look in the mirror. After that, it's about getting buy-in. This is a team sport. This is not an individual sport. A CEO or a managing principal can't turn the course of the company culturally by themselves. It just isn't going to work. So I think having buy-in is the other piece. And then how they communicate the message, how they tell their story is the other piece. Because you may have fantastic internal culture, but if nobody's talking about it, or you're a very small firm, how are they going to know if they never come to work there? You're just hoping that maybe they'll get a glimpse of it during the interview process if they get that far. So, I think those are the big things. Being able to go through the EVP process, getting buy-in from the entire team, and exploring the storytelling.
I think this is a good question from Jose. Which piece do you believe is the most difficult buy-in?
I think Jose, I think you're right. Buy-in is certainly the most difficult because it has to happen at all levels. And it's hard enough to get leadership to buy into it, but once that happens, then they have to be open to getting the entire team involved. Tapping their network, understanding that building advocates instead of employees is how you win in this case. When you're hosting events, are your employees out there, looking for talent? Are they going to other people's events looking for talent? And keeping that in mind, understanding that if you bring the right person onto your team, that's going to make your world different, on top of helping the company. So I think buy-in's probably
I'm going to ask the question that I think all of us have been told 1,000 times about reviews. So reviews of your company, how much do they actually matter when it comes to your employer brand?
I think it certainly matters, because, being an agency recruiter, I get to talk to a lot of people from a lot of different positions when it pertains to a job, whether it's somebody internally, somebody externally, and people will tell, I think, an agency recruiter things maybe they won't tell an internal recruiter, especially if the word on the street about a company is really ugly. They'll tell us in a heartbeat, and they tell us all the good stuff. So I think that is seriously important. When you look at things like Glassdoor, I've worked with a firm who has no social media accounts whatsoever. And I told them, I said, you're exposing yourself to the possibility of a very one-sided conversation that could turn very negative if you're not monitoring and actively involved. Because if you get a few reviews on, Glassdoor that are maybe a little vague or just tell somebody to run, I think it'll certainly have an effect on whether someone wants to continue on with exploring that firm or interviewing with that firm.
I put a link to an article that I wrote once. It was 5 ways to recruit for a crappy company. Because when I was recruited to do recruiting for a really, really bad company, that there's a whole website dedicated to how bad the company is. And it was really bad. And it was in Portland, which is difficult when you're recruiting. I mean, it's hard to get people there for the best job, for the best company, you know? Trying to recruit a recruiter to Nike is hard because when you know it's in Hillsborough.
You're in the mountain. Yeah.
Right.
Are you
check out that article. I think people will find it because I think it was so bad on Glassdoor. It was like half a star. And most people who know me know, I was like, come on, we got to like fix this. Let's talk to people. Let's figure out what we need to do. And I was told that if I wanted to do that, I should be an HR generalist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
pretty yeah, no, I think that's a conversation you have to have. You know, I mean, Stephen asks, isn't Glassdoor simply a protection racket? That depends on how you look at it. Right. If it wasn't Glassdoor, it would be somewhere else. You know, it would be on their Twitter account, their Facebook account. When people have a negative experience with a company, I've had negative experiences working for a particular company. I'm sure everyone has at one point in their career. But you're going to talk about it. Right now, Glassdoor is kind of the platform of the day simply to vent, or, you know, I don't know how many people are running there to give a fantastic review, but if somebody's going to tell the negative story, they're going to tell it. So Glassdoor just happens to be where that message is being carried right now. I wouldn't say that I'm endorsing, you know, or negatively talking Glassdoor either way. It just kind of is what it is. And, you know, I don't know. I think if you ignore it, what's your other plan is my question. If you're just going to put your head in the sand about what people say about your firm, it's going to have.
And companies are starting to measure that effect. I watched a webinar yesterday with Indeed that said that a company with good or bad reviews, so basically any reviews on Glassdoor, get 30% more applies than companies with none. And I mean, that's a lever, right? 30%.
Interesting.
I'll take 30% more. I don't care what they say, right? Like, good or bad. Katrina, it's 30% more applies if you have any reviews on Glassdoor. Doesn't matter if they're good or bad. And
that's impressive.
Right. And I think that is the part where employer branding becomes more than a buzzword and a theory. It's hard fact, right? It's showing that employer branding is a series of levers to help recruiting. It's not fluff. And it irritates me that so many people present employer branding as fluff, right? They're saying, oh, it's how people feel when they come to your website. And I'm like, shut up. Just shut up. Like, nope. Exactly. Hashtag employer branding fluff. And I'm going to start responding to people every time that they post fluff and just tell them, hashtag EB fluff. Because what you're talking about is the stuff that actually matters, right? So like for example, I think if you're in a field where, I'm making this up, but if you're in a field where salaries are pretty standard, right? If you know that you pay better than other people, go tell people. Tell people to tell people. Yeah. Like, tell them to get on Snapchat and talk about it. Tell them to go wherever, but tell the story. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely tell the story. And if you pay less than other people, change the story. Change it to something else. I think it's about how you frame everything, how you have that discussion. And, in the architecture world and the design world, at certain tiers in your career, you're certainly going to run into an acceptable salary range that's kind of standard across the board. And we openly talk with candidates and say, look, if you're taking this job just for the money, don't do it. Don't waste my time. Don't waste the firm's time. This is not just a money play. You can do that on your own. If you actually want to be with a firm that aligns with your professional values, for some people it's their personal values. There's a lot of different things. I think you have to explore that piece of it. And it's funny you mentioned the how you feel when they come to your website thing. That's such a sliver of it to a degree. I mean, it gets important in my world because we've seen a candidate before who we tell about a firm, and then they look at the firm's website and they don't see the projects we know about because the firm isn't telling the story very well. So how they felt when they went to the website, in contrast to the conversations they've had about the firm, was then in conflict. So they've got to make a decision at that point of, is what people are telling me, is that the employer brand, or is what I'm seeing on the website actually the employer brand, the way they
I think
choose
that's
to
important
themselves.
too. When I worked for Holiday Retirement, independent living community. So all the videos were like all these people helping these older seniors going to the room. Like, you can't recruit people with that, because we didn't deal with people in the independent living space at the office. And we had over 10,000 employees. So, I mean, it was like this branding, because we started that process using marketing, but without looking at the work environment. And I think it's also important to when you are, especially in a tough environment, to poll the people in your company to see why they're there. Mm-hmm. Because I was known, as soon as I stopped doing corporate recruiting, I was known for going into companies that had the worst recruiting programs in the world, because I just loved it.
You went to recruiting, and then you tried to recruit for shitty jobs there?
I loved it. They didn't love my Miami-ness in Portland, but I loved it. And so you have to change your recruiting message, right? So we began a separate IT branding page for the company, because IT definitely didn't deal with old people and seniors. That's not why they came to the company. So we had to let them know, this is a tough environment. This is what you're dealing with. And then there are people, I called myself an ambulance chaser, but there's other candidates that are ambulance chasers that want to go into that tough environment. We knew that the turnover was high. So we started looking at more consultants that would actually go in, bang out a project, and we would be okay with that. We started looking at how we hired differently, but we had to show people before they got there, especially as an internal recruiter. I was not going to go down for saying this is great and telling them it was a shitty company. I would have to let them know, well, this guy, this is the environment, right, what it is. He's kind of tough, so that you weren't going to go in and say that, well, you told me this and it wasn't wrong. It wasn't right. You were not going to come to me as your recruiter and say that. They would come to me and say, you told me he was an asshole. Well, I didn't know he was quite that much of an asshole. And be like, well, but I let him know.
The company that makes me think of is a company with an incredible employer brand that we rarely focus on, and it's the U.S. Army. The Army of One, right? Seriously. But so do I.
I know a little bit about that.
Both of my
you did your time too?
Duty, so I did my own version. But
oh my God. Okay.
The thing about that, right, is that they're selling a dream when reality is much different.
A tough life.
But that's a great example, right? Is trying to that's a great example of flipping something that could obviously be sold and recruited one way, but is recruited entirely different.
Let me tell you, because my daughter, she's 15, planning to go lifelong military. She's only 15, so
things can change tomorrow.
But the reason she's always wanted to be, she could want to be a fire truck in like 5 minutes. But the thing that is so telling, going back to the employee brand, is she wanted to be a U.S. Navy SEAL, starting from when she was 5 years old, because they used to have this commercial where people would walk. The ocean would come in and it would go out. Then it came in, it went out. You saw footprints. Then it came in and came out, and they were gone. And she goes, "Mommy, where did they go?" And I was like, "We're not supposed to go. They're U.S. Navy SEALs." And she's like, "What's that?" And we started letting her know the truth of it. But because of that one commercial that she saw when she was like 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, here we are 11 years later. And she still wants to join the military, and she still wants to be a U.S. Navy SEAL, because she sees that. And I told her, we tell her about wars and blowing up and shooting people, and she's like, well, then I'll be a social worker for the Army. Well, she'll find out more later. Don't ruin the dream. But I mean, the branding is there. And
Oh yeah, well, and I think they have multiple stories to tell too. I mean, there's the slick packaged Army of One branding, or the Navy commercials during Super Bowl or during Army Navy game are actually pretty fantastic. They do a good job with that. But if you talk to someone who served, you're going to have a very different conversation than the helicopter and tanks coming over the hill. You know what I'm saying? I'll be the first one to tell you that the Army was not easy. But would I trade it for anything? No, that was an experience I wanted in my life. And I learned a lot that I value even today. And that, to me, is more important to their brand than anything they can put on television. Absolutely. I mean, to me, it's what my family does, and it's what so many people do. It's an amazing thing. But I think that's true with other employers as well. Somebody's individual experience can tell the story, but if it never sees the light of day, you're stuck with what gets put out there. I think David has a question. Where does the employer brand live in a company and established group?
About that. Like,
and does one need to be created?
Sell first on employer branding, and how do you help? Who do you pick your advocate? How do you pick your advocate that can help you move it through the company?
I think it's got to be a top-down thing initially when you're having these conversations. The leadership team has to be involved. The marketing team has to be involved. Your HR and recruiting teams have to be involved. So it's not just one or two people. And I think those kind of core leadership roles are the place where I would say it lives. As far as it needing to be an established group, or does it need to be created? I think the answer to that is yes, to both, because you may have the leadership involved, but if it doesn't live with the entire team, if it doesn't live with every employee into that company, from the CEO down to the guy who works in the mailroom that just came on last week, you're going to have things missing, so I think that's an interesting question. It's a tough one. The answer is different with every firm once you get past.
Right. So is it senior marketing piece, or is it senior recruiting and hiring, or is it the CEO? Yes.
Yes.
Those people.
The answer is yes. And I think not just senior, especially when it comes to the recruiting and the marketing piece, it's got to get below senior quickly. The understanding of that brand and that message. I think Stacey Zapar did a presentation actually at the summit recently, where she talked about the fact that most recruiters don't even know their own employer brand. How do you recruit for a company if you don't know what their core is, who they are? I mean, for us as an agency, we have to know that about firms to properly recruit and to get the results that we get time and time again. We have to get inside what they do every day and who they are. Otherwise, we're just selling a bill of goods.
Another part of the question is that if you have a large company with a small recruiting team, work with your marketing to build it out. Because even I think it's important for companies to know that candidates are still buyers, and they are still brand ambassadors based on what their experience is and what they see. So make sure that at least, going into candidate nurturing, that they know more about the company. So it's important to make sure that there isn't any cross information that's not right. But I think that we're going to see more and more like employee branding groups that are going to be separate from marketing, just to deal, because the Army is a great example. Some people go to the Army and they went into combat. Some people, they go in and they become purchasers, or they worked on computers all day. Right. So it's like people don't realize what the possibilities are. So I think now that we're looking at more of the employee engagement and the content marketing, all of these things that we're looking, that we'll probably see a group that will work on that. So.
Yeah. So I was actually going to ask you about that. I've seen a lot of early buzz kind of about the change in roles, and really where in the last few years I think we've started to see a little bleed between marketing and recruiting, and recruiters starting to wrap their arms around it a little bit. I think now we're going to start seeing the job titles start to pop up, and recruiting teams actually starting to get beyond just the person who's doing the recruiting and going, okay, how do we market this message independently of the market?
I actually wrote an article about it a few weeks ago that I'm going to start getting recruited for employer branding positions. I just know it, right? Like, I'm a marketer by trade. I work with recruiters pretty consistently. And at some point, you know, it's going to start that, like, marketers hired as employer branding. And I think, and so not to miss Katrina's question, because I think that's an important one.
For sure.
It's so I am not looking for a job, just to be clear. Thank you, Jeremy. But this would be the last place I would start, by the way. If I was going to announce that anywhere, this would not be the place. But so I actually had an idea when I read your question, Katrina, because I thought that we could just do a better job when we onboard our recruiters and starting to talk to them about why we hired them. So in my mind, the best way to sell an employer brand is to show someone the qualities that they have that are the employer brand, to remind them that we hired them because they have X, Y, and Z. And so when they look at people, we want them to see themselves in those people, that we want them to see those great qualities. And I think that at that point, we start to embrace their personality instead of stifle them.
But remember too, the other thing that you have to look at is if people have gone to more of the marketing angle of hiring recruiters or the sales angle, because for a long time, if you wanted to hire a recruiter, then you looked for somebody who maybe had the accounting, but also had like a sales background, just because it would look like, since they had a sales background, there were things that you could infer, like they don't mind talking to people, that they can get creative, that they know how to close a deal, that they know how to do all these things. And we took a sales approach. Now, especially since we split from sourcing to recruiting, it's changed a bit. Like, so we have sourcers and we have recruiters. Now the sourcers are more of your analytical types, the hunters, social media experts, and then the recruiters doing to the sales part. Just so you know, I reported Leonardo.
Yeah, as you should.
So I tried.
Thank you.
My computer's gapping, so I didn't do it as fast as I wanted to. So I think that the recruiters, and this, no corporate company or no company was going to like this, but the thing that recruiters have to do is make sure that they have their own personal brand on top of this is who I am. Like, don't
just in case all of you are bored, we're putting something else on your list.
Yeah, exactly. Just add that on. But it's important to make sure that you don't, as a recruiter, you don't want to get too tied into your employer brand. You know, I did a stint just for like consulting at Ryder. I didn't want people to think I drove trucks. Right. I mean, or I got, whatever. You have to look at those things too. That's how I would look at that.
Well, absolutely. Because I think, and we all know this, when it comes to recruiting, if you're going to be successful in recruiting, initially what they're responding to is you, not the company. It's the relationship that you build that is super important. I'm kind of curious to get your input on this as far as we make this transition into embracing marketing in the recruiting kind of sector. Are you finding that people who are strong sourcers, who have that technical element, are doing well in the marketing piece because they understand so many of the tools that are out there faster than maybe an old school recruiter who's used to, beating phones and not playing social media or not doing that? Have you seen any differences kind of in our community as marketing, kind of gets its foot in the door?
The thing with sourcers that's interesting is because it's the thrill of the hunt, right? So most people who are really hardcore sourcers that don't want to be recruiters or don't want to go to some other place within HR keep their head down and they just go, right? So I think, and the other part is, and why things like SourceCon exist is because we want to know the latest tool to get there. And that's why people go on to recruiting tools. What's going on? How can we get there? We want to share all of these tips. So I think it's a little bit different from that perspective. Did I answer your question? I feel like I missed out part.
Yeah, no. I'm just kind of curious of how you're seeing it happen, because I see, I do see sourcers kind of naturally tell their story a little bit better in a technical area, online, as opposed to, maybe recruiters who've been doing it for 20 years and missed the technology process
that they have
a while ago.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So I think we're seeing a transition, and the current point we're at in that shift is checklists, which I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with. So fundamentally, a checklist is better than completely winging it and bullshitting. However, it's not better than thinking and being thoughtful and using your emotional intelligence to make better decisions, right? But I do think that at this point, we have enough saturation of information that these very technical people are finding the resources they need to be able to make better decisions. Because I think that's part of it, right? Is that people who go to recruiting tools, for example, they want the answer. They have a question, they want the answer. That's pretty much it, right? But people who go to Recruiting Daily, they want to understand the fundamentals and the psychology, and they want to use those as prompts to making other decisions. And that's a distinct line in the recruiting world. People who want to use their own thoughts and people who want a checklist to just get it.
Right. That's why lists do so well on recruiting tools.
Everybody loves lists.
I mean, if we look at what the most popular articles are, it's top 10 free resources for recruiters. Yeah. Top best, ways to do in Facebook, or ways to look at the social media. Those are the things that we're finding. But I was looking at what Katrina asked. She asked another question or brought something up. I get that, and that's ideal. That's so funny that's what it said. But how do you suggest we change the minds of the marketing police? You can't see that. You have to give me more information.
It sounds like I have a friend who works for a company who has a significant amount of impediments toward putting out different types of collateral when it comes to recruitment marketing in her world. Even something as simple as creating, a slide for an Instagram post has to go through their marketing and design team. It has to be done by them. If it's not done by them,
I quit a job because of that.
I mean,
I've actually quit. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's like putting handcuffs on yourself. Okay, great. Nobody wants that. It's not going to work for the company long term. And I would say if you're a recruiter that sees the writing on the wall with this, and you're not getting the investment and buy-in from your marketing and leadership team, they're going to feel the pain for that eventually. Maybe it's time to look at some place that does get it when it comes to your ideals in recruiting, if you don't want to take up the crusade and carry the battle flag in on that one, because it might be a long, nasty fight.
So that's also when you go to your personal brand again. Yeah. So I have coached some recruiters and told them, if that's the situation, go back to your personal brand, set the message on your own. You don't necessarily have to bring the employee brand in there, but just say, I'm recruiting for this position. This is what's going on, or whatever. And make sure that you work that into your personal brand while they're getting their head out of the sand.
Another thing that I like to do, because I've worked in very traditional marketing roles and also marketing for recruiting, is that I like to model the recruiting process with the marketing process, the sales cycle specifically, because more data points from webinars, but there are 7 kind of key decisions that a job seeker has to make before they can accept a role. And there's a lot of kind of emotional flux in that process. And the sales process really closely aligns to that. And so I always tell recruiters, okay, if you can kind of get them on the same level where they can see that parallel, then you can say, I need the same resources that you need to be able to sell through that whole pipeline. Okay, you need top of the funnel content. So do I. Here's the the type of top of the funnel content that work really well for me. Okay, there's the middle of the funnel. This is my middle of the funnel. And it involves me reaching out and doing XYZ and modeling those two together. Marketing, I've seen so many light bulbs in that moment because finally they go, oh, your job's just like mine.
Well, you can also say what's funny too is when you're cleaning things up and there's definitely a transition, you can tell the people in recruiting, this is what I was recruiting for. This is the position that I needed. This is what my candidate saw.
Yeah.
So, and show them, it's important. I don't think that marketers look at candidates as consumers. So you kind of have to go through the process. First, they're going to go to this job page. Then they're going to go to our website. Then they're going to go to Glassdoor or whatever it is. So this is what they're seeing when they come here. And again, I think like everyone has been saying, like it's important because these are going to be consumers and they're going to be purchasers of your company or your brand based on this whole experience. And it starts with, your job site and the recruiter piece,
Absolutely. I think that's a super important point. We've had a client that we've had a conversation with before and I ask them, what's the first thing that happens when somebody applies to your company? And the leadership team didn't know. They kind of they looked around a little bit. They looked to the person who handled HR and there was a lot of, hemming and hawing. And at that point we have to say,
in all fairness,
have you ever applied to your own company?
Okay.
No,
they're using Taleo. Yes, I don't know.
It's just magic at that point. But yeah, I think it's important that they understand that part of the process too, at least from the leadership side.
Right? You really want to challenge them, hand them a cell phone and make them do it. That'll really get people in check. I'm pretty sure, 75 to 85% of any site you were to apply to on mobile, you wouldn't finish. None of us.
Yeah. Well, and I'd be willing to bet that if they actually looked at their analytics about how people interact with their company online, they'd find that it leans mobile, and that's only going to continue to grow. So if you're not thinking about how people can apply on their iPad or their phone, you're missing out on a huge.
We had an event this past week, Reconverse, and happens on every show. Something happens on the show with your little dog.
It's true. Every time.
No, but she does something. Oh, go take care of that. So I had to let my dog in. Sorry, and we're about to get a new dog. We'll figure out that Blab dog. Yes, Katrina has one too. But what was so interesting is that I would start out with normal demos on the laptop, but almost the 3 top companies that impressed me, we went over and did the process on the phone. And I was like, wait, whoa, like this is the exact same thing you showed me. And it was the exact same process on the phone. And they were like, oh yeah, that's not a big deal. I was like, it's such a big deal. Like you just showed me that I could post a job, do the branding, change the formatting, implement video interviewing on my phone. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah. It's a huge deal.
Yeah. And now, we're changing it. If you're not mobile optimized, like what year are we in? It's like Back to the Future. That just doesn't even make sense.
Right. Well, Google made the changes in their algorithm last year to reflect that, the importance, and kind of also put their stamp on, we understand that the world's going mobile and that has to be part of our search results and how people interact too. Which I'm not sure how many people understand that for their business or their website either, despite, how much it's out there and how many articles are out there. A lot of business owners are too busy running their business to, dive into that.
Well, and we're not very respectful, and I'm not going to talk about millennials. But there are multi-generation applies, right? And we are not respectful of the fact that there's a group that's applying to our jobs, especially if we have like lower, entry-level jobs that don't have laptops anymore. I know people who don't own laptops because they don't need it. Right.
Well, the thing is that, especially if you're doing in a diverse group, and you're trying to rein people in, I guarantee more people apply for jobs while they go to the bathroom than they do when they're sitting at a desk. I mean, you click, you apply with LinkedIn, you're done. It takes 3 seconds, which is also why, people kind of suck because they apply for 13 million jobs. So,
right. Without reading. Well, because the job description itself isn't mobile optimized. So you start playing the mobile hokey pokey, as I like to call it, where you're like, put it in, put it out. Like, what? Yeah.
Yeah, if I can't apply for a job on my iPhone 6 Plus, you got a problem. Because, I mean, it's as big as my TV used to be. It should be
a quarter the size of my laptop. It should work. Yeah.
Right.
That's funny. Yeah,
absolutely.
Totally. True. So we have about 10 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, now is your time. We can roll through Q&A. I think, we've definitely touched on a lot of employer branding levers, right? It's not there is data to be had for employer branding. And actually that leads me to a question that I have. What are some employer branding metrics that you're encouraging people to measure?
It depends on what they want to accomplish, but I think they have to, we have to evaluate how they're looking at their website. So what kind of hits are you getting on your career page? Where's your traffic coming from that you're driving traffic to your careers page? Especially when it comes to the same thing is true for like events pages or things like that. When you're doing an event that is targeted toward getting, potential candidates interested, how are they finding out about you? So the first metrics they should really pay attention to is where the people who are receptive to their story already are. Find out where they are and then figure out how to build out and get a foothold in the areas that you need to, that they aren't right now. Later, but respond to the people who are already connecting to you. I think that's really the first factor. Also kind of understanding where their people are telling the story. If you've got employees that are exceptionally active on LinkedIn, for instance, leverage that. Why wouldn't you? But I think we're going to see it a lot more in the next couple of years. Facebook groups are edging out LinkedIn groups. They're really sucking the air out of the room over on LinkedIn. And I think Facebook is, as they roll out Facebook at Work and all these other things, people are already creating Facebook at Work using groups. I think finding out where your message is, if it's on one of these platforms, and then leveraging that as much as you can. And another thing, too, is people are coming up with questions. I know there are still some skeptics about employer branding and the fluff piece. One thing to take into consideration, employer branding was there before we labeled it employer branding. Yep. Just remember that when you always kind of go, oh God, here we go again. No, it was always there. It's repackaging perception is what employer branding is as a label.
I just added a link. I wrote an article. It's 4 important metrics for social recruiting, but I think that it can be used in the branding piece as well, because it looks at like what to look at as in Twitter and on Facebook, what the impact is, spamming, screening. So take a look at that. I think it's relevant. Yeah. Of course, I wrote it, but I do think it's relevant.
Self-promo, employer branding.
Shameless plug.
It's our show.
I was going to say, none of us would be here if we were afraid of a shameless plug. So it's all good.
I would add, I think, if you really want kind of the very highly structured kind of information, type in inbound marketing attraction measurement. Attraction is is the marketing word for employer branding. And you can find all the templates, checklists, examples, stories anybody might want and steal it from marketing, because they already stole all this good stuff from us.
In fact, HubSpot has a free inbound marketing certification course, and the resources that are in there are monster. Yeah. They are really, really good. So if you want to really wrap your head around it and dive in and feel like you can, start being functional in employer brand and making a difference, do that. It'll change the way you approach your blog, your storytelling, everything, because it gives you a lot of good insight and a lot of places to start with the metrics as well.
Totally. And yeah, because it's just not that difficult. Like, if you've ever sat in a bar, had a drink, and told someone a really great story about work, you've done employer branding.
Right.
And you have to translate that if it, in its own way, right, with its own rose-colored glass of sorts, however your company needs to do it. But if you can tell that story coherently in a bar, you can tell that story on your website.
Yeah, absolutely.
If not,
absolutely
somebody
true.
else
And
will
I think
for
that,
you.
Right.
yeah.
If not, you can hire
and
Zach. He can teach you.
That's the root of it. I think is what you got at is sitting on a bar stool having a conversation with somebody. Your conversations around your employer brand and your recruiting should be equally as authentic, if you will, because that's how people connect. You know.
And you can ask a question about recruiters if it's a nice one.
That depends on the answer you want. Ask away.
Exactly. It depends on the answer you want.
We might answer. Right. We're running out of time. I know. I saw my famous dog over here being a jerk.
I know. My dog had to go to the bathroom,
I'm pretty sure mine already went somewhere, but I'm just ignoring
You've got
it
a
at this
puppy.
point.
When your dog does it, it's a mistake. And on mine, it's just being rude.
Rude. Yeah.
Okay. Why recruiters ask useless, illogical questions sometimes, like, why did you leave your last company? And 90% of candidates will answer, I'm looking for a new experience.
Because people lie.
Well,
I
got to tell you, I don't hear that answer most of the time. I hear a wide variety of answers. I hear answers like, you know what? My firm's top heavy. I'll never get promoted. I have to wait for somebody to get hit by a bus or retire to get a
real
promotion.
Glassdoor review when you ask that question.
Yeah.
When you're agency.
I think, to be honest with you, I think if a candidate gives me that answer, I'm going to dig deeper. I'm going to ask. I'm going to play. There's something called the 5 whys if you want to get to root cause, and kind of reapply that when somebody gives you an answer you don't like or that you think is a staged, prepped answer. Dive in, drill down, get to the heart of the matter, because I don't think anybody's sitting in their job just saying, gosh, I'd really love diverse experience. I think I'll look for a new job today.
I want to be
Nobody does that. Nobody does that.
When recruiters are recruiting, when recruiters are looking to recruit, we don't want to give you a different experience, right? We recruit because you look like you've done this exact same job, and that we want you to do that
someone else
exact same job here. So that's not a good answer. That's where it goes back to the employee branding piece.
Right.
You can do your exact same job at a better company.
And to speak to that question too, maybe you haven't run across a good recruiter. I hate to say it. Maybe you're dealing with people that let you give pat answers and walk away, which isn't doing yourself a favor or the recruiter or their client firm. So, I think give a thoughtful answer. And if you don't get, anywhere with that, maybe it's time to look for a different recruiter to work with, somebody who actually cares about the reason why.
And that's not even the real question, right? I mean,
right?
The real question is, have you been fired?
Right. And sometimes, maybe. And sometimes, I ask candidates, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I really don't want to know where they're going to see themselves in 5 years. I want to know how they're going to answer that question.
Well,
I want to know so that when they go into the interview, I need them to think about, because it tells me whether or not this is going to be a good fit for them.
Well, and it's good leverage when you have to kind of make different value propositions, right?
I can tell them how this is going to help them reach their goals in 5 years.
I know you want to be. Do you know that we blah 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 to help you blah blah blah?
But as a manager, my favorite, they're like, I'm gonna be in your seat in 5 years. Bitch, no, you ain't.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take my chair with me.
At a startup, that is a good answer, though. If you're in the right environment and someone asks, where do you want to be in 5 years? And you say, I want your job. That's a good answer in the right environment.
That means they're going to leave and have their own startup, Katrina. That means they're going to steal all your information, and they're not going to have a blab. They're going to call it flab. No, bad answer.
Right.
Don't listen to her. Flab.im. Blab.co. Sorry, it's getting to the end of the hour. My filter is gone now.
Jack, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Seriously, this
Thank you for having me. This is fun, guys.
Yeah.
This is really a blast.
Little Kathy Lee and Hoda in the morning.
Yes, Kathy Lee and Hoda. Come back next month. And I don't know what.
Yeah, I'm
I'm going to poll people.
glad you guys got to see the sunrise here in Seattle.
Beautiful.
We'll do it. We'll try to do it next month. And I wanted to ask people. I had somebody ask if they could be on the Blab to talk about body language, what I thought was really weird.
It's interesting.
Does anybody else think that would be interesting? I mean, he's like an expert.
Yeah.
I was so like, what? No. But then when I saw his video, whatever, of course, it was not Leonardo, Jeremy.
I mean, worst case scenario, it could get weird, and that would be entertaining. But I think it would be an interesting topic.
Me and Katrina are all about the entertaining.
We do. I
Okay,
mean,
good.
you saw some of our entertainment, though. It gets a little sketch, crosses the line, but
Damn
whatever.
that Blab. It's new. Blab is new. They're working it out.
Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah,
Inappropriate gesture that I won't make because this is recorded. All right,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zach. We'll talk soon. And this recording will be live on
Thanks.
Recruiting Tools whenever Jackye gets it up.
Okay, today. I promise. Bye.